Hi there. My name's Songbird. Welcome to the Vault. Intimidation, coercion, threats, ultimatums. All part of the biggest, dirtiest, most far-ranging conspiracy of all time. That's like, ever. And over the course of this series of transmissions, I'm gonna prove it to you. It's all here in the files. Don't go anywhere. This is full disclosure. All the way. And tonight we're talking Roswell. The final word. Actually, I got something pretty special for you tonight. A taster, anyway. Take a look at this.
Nobody gets it. Unless I say so. Yes, sir. Doesn't look like it. No, unless I say so. I know lab boys will be here soon enough.
Damn, that's a piece of concealed history right there. I know I showed you a few frames of that footage last time, but I since managed to lay my hands on the original file with the audio. I'll get it cleaned up ready for next time. See if we can make out what those dudes are saying.
I say so. Yes, sir. The smoke's still coming.
Oh, you want to see it one more time? No problem.
Nobody gets it. Unless I say so. Yes, sir. Doesn't look like it. No. Unless I say so. I know lab boys will be here soon enough.
Wow. That's straight out of the lost Roswell file right there. The one I told you about last time. I'll get it cleaned up in time for the next transmission. Don't miss it. Now, as you all know by now, I'm known down here as Songbird. It's the code name I was assigned when I was transferred from the Air Force National Air and Space Intelligence Center to this remote cosmic top-secret base run by the Authority, the super-secret shadow cabal that pretty much runs everything, as we covered in transmission 2. It wasn't an assignment I volunteered for, incidentally, nor one I particularly wanted, but frankly, I had no choice in the matter. When the Authority calls your name, you either jump to the front of the queue or you end up donating your organs to science, if you get my drift. So here I am, all my organs intact, and now that I've seen what they've got going on down here, well, I promise you this much. Whenever I'm able to cold sweat the security, I'll be down here in the vault unwrapping as much as I can. And tonight I'm unwrapping Roswell, the final word, the final chapter. Gonna blow the lid clean off. Not only in terms of disclosing the truth about what really happened out there in the New Mexico desert in June 1947, although we're gonna do that too. But more importantly, we're gonna be skinning the veil off of why that truth has been covered up for the past 80 years. Turns out there's an unexpected reason for the cover-up, one that outstretches anything you'd care to imagine on a routine vanilla Monday. It's written here in the files, and it's high voltage. Stay tuned. Okay. So as we saw last time, the cosmic files concealed down here in the vault confirm the claim that the Roswell UFO incident was real, that it was a crashed UAP or non-human intelligence craft, or as the files logged it at the time, an extraterrestrial recon craft or reconnaissance craft that the US military retrieved and stashed away in numerous secure facilities not unlike this one, facilities like Wright Field and Groom Lake, where they set to work studying and reverse engineering the highly advanced technology that made it sing. I mean, I say highly advanced technology, but that's not strictly correct. In fact, it doesn't even come close. For one thing, it implies we're talking a kind of technology similar to ours, just more sophisticated, more highly advanced, when in truth it's a different species of technology altogether, as we will see. Anyway, they're still at it. The syndicate of defense contractors who run this shit show, the so-called military-industrial complex, they're still at it. After all these years, still trying to get a tune out of what in truth is as much consciousness-connected technology as it is nuts and bolts. More about that as we proceed. Much more. First though, speaking of nuts and bolts, let's get down and dirty with what we actually know about what happened out there in the New Mexico desert on the night of Wednesday, June 4th, 1947. About what the files tell us, the facts, and the people, the witnesses, and there were lots of them. Literally hundreds of eyewitnesses who saw a vehicle of unknown origin, a UFO or UAP, whatever you want to call it. But what in 1947 was known as a flying saucer. Literally hundreds of eyewitnesses saw that thing come crashing down to Earth in the midst of a supermassive thunderstorm. Not one of them was in any doubt about what they saw. Not even the military tried to hide the fact that a UFO had crashed out there in the desert, and that a team from Roswell Army Airfield had retrieved it and transported it back to base. It was on TV, on the radio, in the press, front page. It was all over everywhere that the military had captured a flying saucer, to use the terminology of the day. For the first 24 hours following the retrieval, this was the official story, straight from the mouth of Colonel William Blanchard, commander of Roswell Army Airfield at the time of the crash. He even authorized Roswell Army Airfield's public information officer, Walter Haut, to write up a press release and feed it out to the press for all the world to see. The story was first published in the Roswell Daily Record newspaper and subsequently reissued via multiple media outlets both nationally and worldwide. For the record, here's an excerpt from a transcript of Walter Haut's original newswire. It goes like this. Yesterday, the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. There, he says it, a disc, not a balloon, not a roll of tinfoil, which would be presented to the press the following day, along with a few bits of rubber and lengths of balsa wood, in an effort to convince the world it was all a big mistake and that in fact what had crashed was a weather balloon. No, it was a disc, black and white.
Nobody gets inside unless I say so. Yes, sir.
Now don't forget this report was written by Roswell Army Airfield's public information officer, First Lieutenant Walter Haut, and signed off by the base commander, Colonel William Blanchard. Both of these highly regarded Army officers had seen the debris for themselves. They knew what it looked like. They knew it wasn't a weather balloon. What they didn't know was how hard and fast the shit was about to come down on their celebrity moment. That applies in particular to Walter Haut, as we'll see a little later. The report went on to say that the flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week, and concluded by saying that the disc was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. To be clear, higher headquarters was Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas, where the disc was initially stored. Here it was hidden away under the watchful eye of Fort Worth commanding officer, General Roger Ramey, until such times as a secure hangar could be prepared at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, home of the military's Foreign Technology Division. So there you have it. It was official. The military had retrieved a crashed flying saucer. Incontrovertible, slam dunk. But then the authorities stepped in. New orders arrived from Central Office, courtesy of the Secret Service. Men in black with attitudes and guns and orders to use them unchecked. That's when the story changed. Overnight, the deny, debunk, and discredit strategy kicked in, and the disc became a weather balloon. Suddenly, the debris was nothing more than a crashed high-altitude weather balloon, while reports of dead bodies discovered at the crash site were discounted altogether as figments of the imagination, despite that multiple eyewitnesses had seen and handled the debris material, all of whom said they had never before encountered such a strange, unearthly substance, and despite also that the bodies of the crash victims had been observed by a number of both military and civilian witnesses. This new explanation was now the official story. It was the new gospel, and the government promoted that gospel like some eternal, immutable truth. They wrapped this truth in silver and gold and displayed it on the world stage for everyone to see, like a trophy, like they were mighty proud of this truth, like nothing could ever challenge it or change it, ever. But then they changed it. Some 50 years later, they rewrote that gospel, rebranded that truth. For almost half a century, the military maintained the weather balloon facade. But then in 1994, for reasons best known to the big white chiefs inside the Pentagon, they released a new statement claiming that it wasn't a weather balloon that had crashed at Roswell after all, but a Project Mogul's spy balloon. They also admitted for the first time that witness claims of alien bodies being seen at the crash site and at Roswell Army Airfield, what these days we might refer to as non-human biologics, but whatever you choose to call them. At the same time as rewriting the gospel on the weather balloon story, the military also finally admitted that reports of alien bodies having been seen at Roswell were most probably true after all, although they did caveat this with, "Here, look at this. It gets crazier by the decade." Look, they admitted that reports of alien bodies being seen at Roswell were probably true, but added that what the witnesses mistook for dead alien bodies were in fact crash test dummies. I mean, should we laugh out loud now, or should we wait for the punchline? Speaking of punchlines, check this. I'm gonna put the fake weather balloon story to one side for a moment. If any of you are keen to know in more detail about how they tried to get that one over on you, a heads up that we covered it pretty extensively last time in Transmission 4, so just head on over and help yourself to the truth about the big fat Project Mogul and weather balloon deception right there. Right now, though, let's microscope the crash test dummy theory they're putting on you in this latest version of the Roswell Gospel. So crash test dummies are what's known as anthropomorphic test devices, basically human-sized models or mannequins. Today, they're used mostly in automobile safety tests, and specifically to measure the effects on the human body in traffic collisions. In the early days of high-altitude flight, though, they were used by the military to measure the effects on the human body in ejection seat events and parachute jumps. For obvious reasons, the dummies were, and still are, modeled on the form of an adult human being in every respect. Weight, height, skeletal structure, physical appearance, everything. This is an obvious and deliberate design, right? But here's the thing. The bodies seen at the crash site and at Roswell Army Airfield were all without exception described as being child-sized and non-human in appearance. Small, slender bodies around 3 to 4 feet in height with large almond-shaped heads and eyes. Now this description is not in any way a match for your standard crash test dummy. Not in anyone's world. And then there's this. I dug this one out earlier. This file here, it's indisputable. 100%. Fact. Look here. This is an extract from the original contract between the United States Air Force and the Sierra Engineering Company. As it states here, the project goal was to create a human-like mannequin that would replicate the size and weight of a 95th percentile male pilot, in brackets approximately 200 pounds and 5 feet 10 in height. The project purpose was to study the physiological effects of rapid deceleration on the human body. Can't say it clearer than that. Now look, here, it gives the year in which the contract was signed off, the same year the dummy was invented. Look, right here. The year was 1949, 1949, 1949. The world's first crash test dummy was invented in 1949. That's 2 full years after the Roswell crash. On the record now, Roswell happened in 1947. 2 complete planetary revolutions before crash test dummies even existed, much less before they were ever used in anger by the military. Roswell, 1947. The invention of crash test dummies, 1949. Fact. Crash test dummies didn't exist when witnesses to the Roswell crash say they saw dead bodies that they described as being non-human. Chew on that and keep it down. I mean, whatever possessed the military to come up with this crazy-ass theory only they can answer. But something tells me they probably wish they'd stuck with the original gospel, the original lie. Because this new gospel begs many questions. I mean, if the debris was nothing more than a crashed weather balloon, as the military initially claimed, why all the secrecy? Why all the government paranoia and frantic military activity following the event, like cordoning off the crash site, threatening witnesses and red-penning the press release? If, on the other hand, it was a top-secret spy balloon equipped with the latest million-dollar cutting-edge listening technology, as they later claimed, how come the military remained unaware that it had crashed until local rancher Mac Brazel reported that he'd found the wreckage spread all over the desert? At this point, the balloon had been missing for over a month, in which time Brazel had become something of a local celebrity, having been interviewed on local radio and his story published in news outlets nationwide. But until Brazel's story broke, more than a month after the balloon's official launch date, remember, the military seemed conspicuously unaware that one of their top-secret spy balloons equipped with the latest cutting-edge technology had gone missing. No military activity was reported in the area until Brazel's story hit the headlines. No recovery units, no search aircraft, no attempt at all to find the crashed balloon and recover its precious cargo. Seems strange to you? Yeah, me too. Here's the official line on why the military left such a precious top-secret pot of gold out there in the desert to rot. Look, here. Evidently the honchos back at Alamogordo Army Airfield. That's where the balloon had been launched, allegedly. I say allegedly because as we discovered in Transmission 4 last time, the launch of this particular spy balloon had been canceled due to bad weather, which accounts for the fact they never went looking for it because they knew full well it had never been launched in the first place. Check out Transmission 4, it's all laid out right there. But here, look, and this one's for the record. The military say they were unable to track the balloon because, you ready for this? They say they never went looking for it because the battery in the balloon's tracking device failed, so they didn't know where it'd come down. Okay, so I'm just gonna pause right here. Say that one more time, just to please the devil in me. The military's explanation for leaving their most cutting-edge piece of spy equipment out there in the desert for over a month is that they were unable to track it. That's Project Mogul Flight Number 4 out of Alamogordo Army Airfield. The specific balloon they cite as having been mistaken for the Roswell crash. This above top-secret million-dollar spy balloon stacked with America's most precious cutting-edge surveillance technology and recording equipment. That balloon, they were unable to track it because the battery in the tracking device ran out of juice. I mean, come on. They make it up as they go along. Literally. Is the power back on yet? Cool, because there's something else we need to unwrap here. Something else we need to haul out from behind the veil and scrutinize. Demand an answer for. I mean, if a crashed balloon really was all that Mac Brazel discovered out there in the desert, then why was he given such a bad time by the military? Because he was. It's on record in the files down here. It's on record in classified military documents from the time as well, but I haven't been able to get my hands on those yet. But for sure it's on record down here, along with multiple witness statements that back this story up. So you gotta ask the question, why was Mac Brazel detained by heavy-handed military police and Secret Service agents and thrown in jail for 6 days? That's 6 long days and nights, during which time he was sleep-deprived, starved, interrogated, and threatened with his life until he agreed to change his story, until he agreed to go back on air on the local radio and state that in his opinion, what he'd found was the debris from a crashed weather balloon. I mean, this is physical and psychological intimidation right there. It's torture of the highest order, akin to the CIA's extraordinary rendition techniques. Why would they do that to one of their own citizens? Seems to me a wholly disproportionate response to the loss of a weather balloon, or even a spy balloon for that matter, especially one they'd apparently written off anyway until Brazel found the wreckage on the ranch where he worked. I mean, it's not like Brazel had stolen it with a view to selling its secrets to the Soviets, or anybody else for that matter. He was a simple ranch hand who found it and reported it, and was happy that it had found its way into the hands of the military. His military, the American military. I mean, you have to ask yourself what the real motive for treating one of your own citizens in this way could possibly have been. We should mention local Sheriff George Wilcox here too. He was the first person Brazel told about the discovery, the first person outside his immediate family that he showed the debris to. It was Wilcox who phoned Roswell Army Airfield and reported the find. It was also Wilcox who started asking awkward questions about the crash, like why the site had been cordoned off by such a heavy military presence if all that had crashed was a weather balloon. But that's the thing. Wilcox knew damn well it wasn't a weather balloon. He'd seen the craft with his own eyes. He'd seen the dead bodies too, as well as the lone survivor. Fact is, Wilcox had seen too much. He was a dead man walking. Look here. This is a transcript of a secret testimony given by George Wilcox soon after the event. He says, "There was a big burned area and lots of debris all around. It was in the evening when I was there. There were 4 space beings. Their heads were large. They wore suits like silk. One of the little men was alive." And again here, look, you can see here in his wife's testimony, in which she described how men in black came to their home and threatened to kill Wilcox and his entire family if they ever discussed the crash in terms of it being anything other than a crashed balloon. Here's what she said in full. "For the record, Her name was Inez Holland Wilcox. She said, when the incident happened, the military police came to the jailhouse and told George not to say anything. Then men in black suits came and told George and I that if we ever told anything about the incident, not only would we be killed, but our entire family would be killed. Again, you have to ask why the Secret Service saw fit to come down so heavy on one of their own citizens. Why they were so paranoid about a crashed balloon that the military had written off weeks before anyways. Ultimately, Wilcox may have gotten away with his life, but not his sanity. He ended his days in what was known back then as a mental asylum, the victim not only of what he'd seen, but of what his government had done to him because of what he'd seen. It was the ultimate payback. And there are more stories, just like this one. More testimonies stating that what had crashed was not a balloon of any kind, but a craft of unknown origin. More instances of witnesses being intimidated and silenced. The case of Major Jesse Marcel, for example. Marcel's account is pretty well known, so I don't want to spend too much time regurgitating what you might already know. But two reasons to include at least a brief recounting of Jesse Marcel's story. One, he was a senior Army Air Force intelligence officer based at Roswell Army Airfield, and as such he was central to the Roswell story. And two, like Mac Brazel and George Wilcox, Marcel was silenced, as the files will show in just a moment. So we at least have to ask the question, why did Major Jesse Marcel, Roswell Army Airfield's senior Army intelligence officer tasked with investigating the crash, why did Marcel state that in his expert opinion what was recovered from the New Mexico desert was a craft of unknown origin, and that the crash debris was like nothing he'd ever seen? Fact, his exact words were, the debris was not of this world. Remember, Major Marcel was a senior Army Air Force intelligence officer. He held the rank of major because he was a dedicated Army man, intelligent, experienced and reliable, and knowledgeable. As he stated on many occasions, Marcel was familiar with all types of U.S. aircraft and the materials they were built from, including the spy balloons, but having handled and studied the strange debris from the crash site, he said he'd never seen anything like it, ever. You could crumple it up as if it was tinfoil, he said, but as soon as you let it go, it would unfurl all on its own and return to its original shape. He also said it was light as a feather, yet you could bash it with a 16-pound sledgehammer and not be able to damage or break it. This is why he maintained the material was unlike anything he'd ever seen. For sure, it was nothing at all like any materials associated with a 1947 spy balloon or its million-dollar payload. So again, you have to ask the question, if the debris Jesse Marcel and his team retrieved from the crash site was nothing more than ripped up pieces of a high-altitude balloon, why was he silenced? Because he was, just like Mac Brazel and Sheriff George Wilcox. Again, this is all on record, both from the mouth of Jesse Marcel himself and in the files concealed down here in the vault. Fact is, Marcel was forced to state in front of the world's media that the material you see here was that of a downed weather balloon. He knew it was fake debris. He knew it had been switched. He knew he'd been set up. He was humiliated in front of the world, and pretty soon after that he was transferred away from his post at Roswell Army Airfield in the knowledge that if he ever spoke up again he would be in serious trouble, at best. Marcel never did speak again, not for as long as he remained in the military. Not for more than 30 years, in fact. When he finally did break his silence, Marcel reiterated that what the military retrieved that day from the New Mexico desert was not a weather balloon, not a Project Mogul spy balloon, but a flying saucer. Are we starting to build a picture here? Jesse Marcel was not the only military officer to be silenced. Walter Haut was silenced too. You'll recall that First Lieutenant Walter Haut was Roswell Army Airfield's public information officer, and that he wrote the now famous press article stating that the military had captured a flying saucer. It was an article he was forced to redact and amend. He was also forced to remain silent about the matter to his dying day, which he did, but only to his dying day. As you can see here, sometime prior to his death, Walter Haut prepared an affidavit which he stipulated was to remain sealed until after his death. Turns out it contained a confession of sorts, confirming that what had crashed at Roswell was what Haut called some type of craft from outer space. He also confirmed Jesse Marcel's account about the craft being made of material not from this world, and that the material Marcel had been forced to present to the media the day after the retrieval was not the material he had recovered. In other words, the debris had been switched. Haut stated that he saw the recovered craft in what was officially designated Hangar P3, a B-29 hangar situated inside Building 84, hence it later became known in UFO folklore as Hangar 84. He also stated that he saw 2 of the recovered crew members, which he described as being about the size of 10-year-old children with larger than normal heads. As I mentioned just now, First Lieutenant Walter Haut was forbidden to speak to anyone about what he'd seen, on pain of a very unpleasant consequence. And there were plenty of other witnesses we could talk about, many of whom were threatened and silenced, either by the military or by heavy-handed men in black. Look here. This is a list of what the files describe as people of interest. In other words, witnesses whose testimonies would blow this cover-up wide open, should they ever be published unabridged, unredacted. I'm on a time budget here, so I can't possibly shout out every name on the list. But here's a brief sample. Look right here. Roswell residents John W. Jack Cody and his wife Mary, Bill Whitman, Loretta Sheff, Juan and Sophia Rodriguez, Martha Drake and her husband Dan Jr., local ranch hand Sam Duggan, Lydia Sleppy, Robert Smith, Robert Slusher. Still with me? Roswell KGFL radio presenter Frank Joyce, who received the news wire from Roswell Army Airfield's public information officer Walter Haut. Joyce was told in no uncertain terms by the Pentagon to drop the story, or else. Walt Whitmore, owner of Roswell KGFL Radio, who conducted a full interview with Mac Brazel. Whitmore was told if he broadcast the interview, the radio station would be shut down. Then there's Master Sergeant Louis Bill Rickett, non-commissioned counterintelligence officer at Roswell Army Airfield at the time of the crash, who described the crash material as semi-reflective paper-thin metal that was impossible to bend. Rickett was told to keep what he'd seen to himself, or face the consequences. And there are more, many more, whose names are all filed away down here in the vault. Grady Barney Barnett, Frank Kaufman, Joseph Henderson, Maria Garcia Lopez, Judd Roberts, Gerald Anderson, Lou Hernandez. The list goes on. 14-year-old William Woody and his father James were there too. They were among the hundreds of other witnesses that night who said they saw the craft in distress, flying erratically beneath a low cloud cover of a violent thunderstorm. Like so many of the others, Williams said they were warned on pain of death to say nothing of what they had seen. You were never there. You never saw anything. You don't know anything. You can be disappeared. In fact, the files contain several instances of witnesses having been disappeared because of what they saw or what they knew about the incident. One instance in particular was the disappearance of a young woman whose name is recorded in the files simply as Naomi. Her surname has been redacted. According to this file here, Naomi was a nurse at Roswell Army Airfield and part of the team that carried out preliminary autopsies on the dead visitors, the so-called biologics. Here, look. It says, Roswell Army Airfield perioperative nurse, name, rank, and number redacted. It says Naomi was on duty the day of the Roswell crash retrieval. As I just mentioned, it says she was part of the team called in to carry out preliminary autopsies on recovered crew members, brackets deceased. It says her current status is missing. Of course, the military claimed there were no dead visitors at the base, no dead aliens, no biologics, no autopsies. They also claimed that the young nurse called Naomi never existed. Surprising how much easier it is to disappear someone who never existed in the first place. Something else. If there were no dead aliens at the base, no dead visitors, if no biologics were recovered from the crash site, why was Roswell mortician Glenn Dennis instructed to make child-sized coffins for the visitors who had died in the crash? That's right, child-sized. We should remind ourselves here that those who saw the dead bodies all described them as being slender, frail even, and no more than 4 feet tall, about the size of a 10-year-old child with large almond-shaped heads and eyes. Every eyewitness bar none described them in this way, which is notable for the fact that none of the witnesses had any idea what an alien was supposed to look like in those days. Might be part of our folklore today, but it wasn't back then. Again, the files corroborate this description. And there are still more questions, more anomalies, many more, and the answer to all of them is the same. It was a cover-up. It's been a cover-up for 80 years. The question has to be, why? And that brings me full circle. At the top of this transmission, I said I'd let y'all know what the files have to say about why the cover-up was so life and death critical, why it's been maintained for so long, why the government and the authority are so paranoid, so terrified about y'all discovering the truth. I mean the real truth. I said I'd tell you, and I meant what I said. Now, if you recall, I told you last time that I'd do my best to locate and decrypt what's known down here as the lost Roswell file. The file that contains the information I'm talking about. Well, here it is. And it's a curveball, let me tell you. I haven't had a chance to take it all apart yet. It's like hundreds of pages. But the little bit I've handled so far is already a game changer. I mean, look, on the first page right here it says... Damn it. Sorry, folks, but that's all she wrote for tonight. I gotta disappear myself before someone else gets the idea, if you get my drift. Next time, though, the Lost Roswell file. Don't miss that one. Covers more than just Roswell. A lot more. Meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit like and leave a comment and all that stuff. And if you're wanting some backstory on me, there's a video by that name somewhere on the channel. Check it. It'll tell you all you need to know. Okay, I'm out. Stay alive. I'll be back.